I thought I'd seen every kind of crazy living out here in the Utah desert, but nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the morning. I found an HOA gate welded across my private road. No warning, no permission, just a giant steel barricade telling me I needed their authorization to reach my own house. 15 minutes later, my cop buddy showed up. And I didn't just take the gate down. I made sure that entire HOA regretted the day they ever learned my name. It had been nearly 7 years since I'd moved out here, out to my own slice of nowhere, and I never once regretted it. 20 acres of rugged Utah terrain, tucked far enough off the county road that the world felt like it ended half a mile before you reached my mailbox. The land wasn't pretty in the way realtors like to brag about. It was pretty in the way only solitude can be. The quiet kind, the honest kind, the kind that doesn't apologize for anything. Out here, the sky isn't just above you, it's everywhere. A blue so wide it swallows you whole. A blue that makes your problems feel smaller, whether you want them to or not. Some days, I'd walk out my front door and swear I could see the edge of the earth curling away from me. And the road? Lord, that road was my pride. 4,000 feet of dusty, uneven freedom cutting through sagebrush and rocky ground, winding like a stubborn old river toward the small house I'd fixed up with my own 2 hands. The deed listed it plain as day. Private access. Sole owner, Jacob K. Field. No shared access, no easement, no community management, just mine, the way land used to be. Every morning I'd roll down that road in my old F-250, coffee in one hand, dog hanging its head out the window, tail slapping the dashboard like a metronome. The dust would billow up behind us in long golden plumes, lit by the sunrise like smoke from a campfire. That sight never got old. Nobody ever came out that way. Not unless they were lost, desperate, or the kind of delivery driver who cared more about finishing his shift than self-preservation. Most days it was just me, the dog, and the wildlife. Mule deer drifting like ghosts through the brush, coyotes trotting along the edges of the road, pretending they weren't watching me. That silence, that stillness, it was worth more than gold. That's why I bought the place. That's why I stayed. 7 years of peace shapes a man. It makes him calmer, more patient. But it also sharpens his sense for when something isn't right, the way a seasoned rancher can smell rain long before the clouds gather. Looking back, maybe I should have noticed the signs, the drop in mail volume, a stranger's tire tracks where there shouldn't have been any, the sound of metal clanging in the distance one night, faint but unusual. Little things you dismiss at the time because the world has taught you to ignore anything that doesn't scream. Maybe I'd gotten comfortable, maybe too comfortable. But out in the desert, comfort can trick you. It makes you think peace will last forever. It makes you think no one would be crazy enough to bother you out here. And it blinds you, just enough. So, when the storm comes, it feels like it fell out of a clear blue sky. The truth is, trouble was already on its way. It was wearing HOA colors. It just hadn't reached my doorstep yet, but it would. And when it did, it didn't knock. It welded itself across the entrance to my road and dared me to do something about it. 7 years of quiet. 7 years of mornings where nothing happened. 7 years of believing I'd finally found a place untouched by nonsense. Turns out, I was living on borrowed time because my peaceful desert wasn't as empty as I thought, and somebody out there had decided my land was their business. 2 weeks before the gate incident, before everything went sideways, I happened to run into a little preview of the trouble that was coming. It was a Tuesday morning, already warm before 10, and I'd stopped by the co-op for dog feed, fencing staples, and a new pair of work gloves, nothing special. The co-op was the closest thing we had to a town square, part hardware store, part coffee counter, part rumor exchange. I pushed the door open, the little bell above it giving that familiar, tired jingle. Inside smelled like hay, engine oil, and fresh cinnamon rolls somebody's wife brought in every Wednesday. And that's when I saw her, standing by the front counter like she owned the oxygen in the building, Karen Sanders. I didn't know her personally, but I'd heard the name whispered around the county bulletin board like she was folklore, the kind that comes with fines, meetings, and passive-aggressive newsletters. Aviator sunglasses indoors, a fitted blazer much too formal for a feed store, heels that would have sunk 3 inches into real dirt if she ever stepped foot on it. She spoke to the cashier with the confidence of someone who believed every room was lucky to have her. But she wasn't alone. Next to her was a tall, narrow-shouldered man in a beige windbreaker. Mid-60s, thinning hair, face creased not from smiles, but from years of being spoken over. He held a clipboard tucked close to his chest like a shield. He looked defeated, like he'd spent too many years following someone else's orders. That was Glenn. I wouldn't know his name until later. But at the time, something about him tugged at me. Not suspicious, more like tired. A man who had seen too much HOA nonsense and didn't have the spine to walk away. Karen, meanwhile, was in full command mode. "I don't care what the guidelines say," she snapped at the cashier. "You don't put up signs without HOA approval, even temporary ones. It confuses delivery drivers." The cashier, a teenager barely old enough to vote, nodded like he'd been caught stealing horses. "It's just a fresh eggs sign," he mumbled. Karen scoffed. "Chaos starts small." She said it like she was quoting scripture. I grabbed my cart and tried to mind my own business, but there are some personalities in this world that force themselves into your field of vision. Karen was one of them. Her voice carried like she wanted the whole store to hear how important she was. Glenn hovered behind her, an afterthought. Every time Karen made a gesture with her clipboard, he flinched just a little, barely noticeable, but enough for me to pick up on it. When I got closer to grab a box of decking screws, Karen finally turned toward me, her sunglasses tilted down. Just enough for her to give me the scan, that up-and-down judgment HOA presidents seem to be born with. She muttered. "You must be one of the off-grid types." I smiled politely. "Something like that." She stepped forward, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Karen Sanders, president of Cedar Summit Ranch HOA. I nodded. Didn't shake her hand. Not out of rudeness, just not my style. "Jacob K. Field," I said. "I live a ways south of here." Her eyebrows lifted behind the sunglasses. "Oh, that land." Like she'd just smelled something sour. "Interesting location. Not many people choose to live outside community oversight." I shrugged. "That's the point." Glenn's eyes flicked toward me, quick, curious, almost apologetic. Karen's smile tightened, like she wasn't used to people not bending the knee. "Well," she said, tapping her clipboard sharply, "just know Cedar Summit values safety and order. We keep track of everything happening in the area." "In the HOA area," I corrected gently. Her smile thinned further. "Of course," she said, but the edge in her voice said otherwise. She turned and strutted toward the exit, heels clacking like a metronome of self-importance. Glenn followed her a few steps behind, still holding that clipboard, still avoiding eye contact. As she pushed open the door, I heard her say, "Come along, Glenn. We have a meeting at 2. There are updates." Updates. I didn't know it then, but that word would come back to haunt me. They stepped outside, sunlight flashing off her sunglasses like a warning flare. I stood there for a moment, one hand on the dog food bag, watching her SUV pull away. Burgundy with HOA decals on both doors. The kind of paint job that screams rules even from a distance. Something in my gut twisted. Not fear, not paranoia, just instinct. I'd lived long enough out here to trust my instincts. And that morning in the co-op, something whispered, "This woman's gonna be trouble." I brushed it off, paid for my things, loaded the truck. But as I drove home, dust trailing behind me, the sound of her heels still echoed faintly in my memory. Sharp, invasive, unwelcome. I should have paid attention. But I had no idea how fast things were about to escalate, because the next time Karen Sanders crossed paths with me, she wasn't waving a clipboard. She was blocking my damn road. 2 mornings after that co-op encounter, the desert felt different. I couldn't explain it. Nothing looked out of place at first. The sky was clear, the air cool, the sunrise slow and gold, the kind of quiet morning you'd frame if you could. But something tugged at the back of my mind. A tension. A wrongness. My dog felt it too. He sat upright in the passenger seat, ears perked, watching the road with that alert posture animals get when they sense something we humans overlook. We rolled down the county road like always, turning toward the little dirt entrance that led home, the road I'd driven thousands of times. Except today, as the bend straightened into the final stretch, I saw it. A dark shape where there should have been nothing but open air and sagebrush. I slowed the truck, frowned, leaned forward. Then my heart dropped into my boots. A gate. A steel gate. Big, industrial, brand new, welded across the mouth of my private road. What in God's name? I pulled up slowly until the front bumper was just inches from the steel arms. My own road was gone, replaced by HOA arrogance. I stepped out of the truck, gravel crunching under my boots, and walked toward the structure like approaching some strange animal that didn't belong in the wild. Up close, it was even worse. Fresh concrete footings still soft around the posts, dark, recent welds, a keypad with blinking red light, an RFID sensor, and bolted across the middle, private access, Cedar Summit, residents only, all entry must be authorized by HOA security. My chest tightened. Cedar Summit? They were over a mile away, separated by elevation, brush, and every law on the books. They had no authority here, no jurisdiction, not even a path to pretend they did. I bent down and pushed a fingertip into the concrete, still warm, still curing. This gate had gone up in the last 24 hours, probably while I was asleep. My dog barked once, low, confused, almost offended. I couldn't blame him. A small black camera eyed me from the top of the post, its lens reflecting the desert sun like a dead, unblinking pupil. Someone had positioned it deliberately to capture anyone approaching from the county road, anyone trying to get to my home. Unbelievable, I muttered. But it wasn't unbelievable, not really. Not after meeting Karen, not after hearing the way she said, community oversight, protective buffer zone. We track everything happening in the area. This wasn't oversight, this was occupation. I circled the gate slowly, reading every weld, every bolt, every footprint around the base. Fresh tire tracks led off into the brush, wide ones, the kind you'd get from a contractor's trailer hauling metal posts. They'd done it at night, quick job, probably hurried, but confident enough to think no one would catch them. My pulse ticked harder. Then the real punch landed. I wasn't locked inside my land. I was locked out of it. This gate wasn't blocking people from wandering onto my property. It was blocking me from getting home. I stared at it, jaw tight, breath steady. I wasn't scared. I wasn't panicked. I was something worse, focused. The kind of focus that comes when someone crosses a line they shouldn't have come near. I took out my phone and snapped a dozen photos. The sign, the keypad, the concrete, the camera, the tire tracks. Every angle, every detail. But I didn't call anyone, not yet. Calling could wait. Paperwork could wait. The county could wait. Right now, there was only one person who needed to answer for this. I climbed back into the truck. My dog looked at me, ears tilted, sensing the shift in my energy. "No," I said softly. "We're not going home. Not until I fix this." I turned the wheel the opposite direction, back toward the main road, back toward Cedar Summit Ranch, back toward that beige clubhouse where Karen Sanders held court like she was judge, jury, and executioner of the cul-de-sac kingdom. The engine hummed low and angry as I pressed the pedal. Dust lifted behind me in a long, rising plume. I wasn't going back to the house. I was going to get answers, face to face. And the woman who welded a gate across my private road was about to have the worst morning of her life. I drove straight from the blocked road to Cedar Summit Ranch, dust trailing behind me like a storm warning. My truck rumbled into their neatly paved parking lot, the kind of pristine asphalt that looked like it had never seen a real day's work. Fake perfection. Exactly the kind of place Karen would feel at home. The HOA clubhouse stood at the center of the development like a government building pretending to be classy. Beige walls, oversized columns, a flagpole proudly flying a banner with the HOA logo, a stylized mountain range no one living here had ever actually hiked. I parked crooked, on purpose. Before I even killed the engine, I felt eyes, neighbors walking dogs, a jogger, a couple trimming hedges to some ridiculous HOA-approved height. All of them glancing over just long enough to register. Outsider. I stepped out of the truck and marched straight toward the clubhouse doors. Inside, the air smelled like printer toner, disinfectant, and whatever overpriced candle Karen thought made the place seem professional. The floor was spotless tile. The reception desk was unmanned, but voices drifted from the meeting room. Karen's voice, clear, sharp, overconfident. As long as the community supports our safety measures, we can move forward with Phase 2. Phase 2? I pushed open the meeting room door without knocking. The room froze. At the front of the conference table stood Karen Sanders in a cream blazer, heels planted like she was giving a TED Talk on micromanagement. Behind her sat two board members, and off to the side, clutching paperwork, stood Glenn, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes wide. Karen blinked once at me, then smiled with that politician smile she'd perfected in front of her bathroom mirror. "Well, Mr. Kayfield," she said, as if greeting someone mildly inconvenient, "to what do we owe this surprise visit?" I held up my phone. On the screen, a clear photo of the steel gate welded across my road. "You want to tell me," I said slowly, "why I can't get home?" Karen didn't flinch. "This is a simple misunderstanding," she said. "Cedar Summit is expanding its protective buffer. We're implementing new access control to my land?" I cut in. "My private road? My deeded property?" One of the board members cleared his throat. "Well, technically the surrounding area." "Technically," I said, stepping forward. "You all broke the law." Karen let out a small laugh, the kind people make when they think they're dealing with someone beneath them. "Oh, Mr. Kayfield, you rural types always misunderstand jurisdiction. This isn't personal. This is about safety. We have residents concerned about unknown vehicles near the perimeter." "I live near your perimeter," I said. She tapped her clipboard. "We're aware." Something about the way she said it, calm, smug, hit me wrong. I took another step closer, lowering my voice. "You welded a gate across my road." "Our contractor installed an access control barrier," she corrected. "You blocked me from entering my own property. It's temporary. You put a camera on it. For monitoring. You told me at the co-op that you were tracking everything in the area." She shrugged, like she didn't remember or didn't care. "That road is within our buffer zone," she said. "No," I snapped. "That road is mine." Karen folded her arms, tone tightening. "If you'd like access, Mr. Kayfield, you can easily fill out our authorization request. Once the board approves it, we'll issue you a temporary code." I stared at her, barely believing what I was hearing. "You want me," I said, "to apply for permission to drive on my own property?" Glenn shifted behind her, his lips pressed together. His eyes flicked to me, then to Karen, then away. A crack. Small, but there. Karen lifted her chin. "As I said, it's standard procedure." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not loud, not angry, just disbelieving. "You've lost your damn mind," I said. "Excuse me?" Karen snapped. "You heard me?" The room went silent, except for the soft hum of an HVAC vent. Finally, Karen motioned to the board. "I think we're done here." "No," I said, planting my hands on the table. "We're not." Karen stiffened. "You're going to remove that gate," I said. "Today? Right now." She smiled again, that tight, condescending smile. "And if we don't," I leaned in, "then I'm calling the county, then I'm calling the sheriff, and trust me, they're going to have a field day with what you just did." Karen's smile faltered, just a flicker, but I saw it, a crack. Behind her, Glenn shifted again, this time stepping slightly forward, as if he wanted to speak but knew better. Karen straightened her blazer. "Mr. Kayfield, if you walk out that door, you'll regret the way you're handling this." I stared her down. "Lady, the only thing I regret is wasting 4 minutes listening to you talk." And with that, I turned, left the room, and marched back into the sunlit parking lot. My pulse was steady, my mind was sharp. I'd played it calm. Because the next step wasn't arguing, it was bringing in someone who actually had authority. Someone who knew the difference between an HOA dispute and a crime. Someone named Lieutenant Mark Dorsey. Driving away from the HOA clubhouse, my hands were tight on the steering wheel, not shaking, just locked in place. Like my body already knew this wasn't something I was going to solve with polite conversation or forms or whatever Karen called procedure. I didn't go home. Couldn't go home, because home was blocked by them. So instead I swung the truck around to a pull-off near the county road, grabbed my phone, and scrolled to a name I trusted more than any HOA board combined. Lieutenant Mark Dorsey. I hit call. He answered on the second ring, voice calm and gravelly like always. "Dorsey." "It's Jake," I said. "I've got a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The illegal kind." A pause, not hesitation, calculation. "Where are you?" he asked. "About 100 yards from the mouth of my road." "Stay put," he said. "I'll be there in 15. 15 minutes, not 16, not 20. 15. That's the kind of man Dorsey was. I waited in the shade of a juniper, dust swirling in slow spirals along the county road. My dog sat beside me, tail thumping anxiously. Then, right on time, I heard the low rumble of a county sheriff cruiser making its way toward me. Silver, dusty, reliable. Dorsey pulled up, stepped out, and adjusted his belt. He wasn't a tall man, but he carried himself like a granite boulder, slow-moving, immovable, and absolutely done with everyone's nonsense. His eyes took me in quickly. "You look like you've had a morning," he said. "You haven't seen anything yet." I motioned him to follow. We walked those last 100 yards to the gate. Dorsey stopped dead when he saw it. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. He walked closer, bending down to inspect the fresh concrete, running a hand over the steel, tapping the keypad with 2 fingers, like checking if it was real. "They welded this?" he asked. "Last night, looks like." He glanced at the camera on the post, little black eyes staring right back. "That yours?" he asked. "No." "Figures," he said. He stepped back, hands on hips, lips pressed flat. The expression he got when he saw something so stupid it made his blood pressure spike. "All right," he said quietly. "Walk me through it." I told him everything. The co-op encounter, the HOA claim about a buffer zone, Karen's arrogance, the clubhouse confrontation, everything she said, and everything she ignored. Dorsey listened without interrupting, the way only a seasoned lawman can. When I finished, he shook his head. "They really blocked your road," he said. "Your deeded road." "Yep." "That's criminal obstruction." "Yep." "And they filmed you approaching your own property." "Yep." "And they told you needed a code." "Yep." He exhaled like a man who had just read the last chapter of a very stupid book. "Well," he said, "that's enough for me." He reached for his radio. "Wheeler, get over here," he said. "Bring a toolbox." 10 minutes later, another cruiser arrived. Officer Wheeler stepped out, younger, more jittery, the kind of guy who looked like he'd rather be investigating a bank robbery than whatever HOA circus had just rolled into our county. He took one look at the gate and groaned. "Oh no," Wheeler said. "Is this HOA stuff?" "Yes," Dorsey replied, "and we're not putting up with it today." He turned to me. "You got bolt cutters?" "No." He nodded at Wheeler. "He does." Wheeler trudged back to the cruiser, muttering under his breath, and returned with a set of heavy-duty bolt cutters. Before he even positioned them, we heard tires rolling on pavement. A white SUV, HOA logo on the side. It stopped right at the other end of the gate. Door opened. And out stepped Karen Sanders, sunglasses on, clipboard in hand, expression already annoyed like we were late to a meeting she hadn't scheduled. "Officers," she said sweetly, "can I help you?" Dorsey didn't miss a beat. "Yeah," he said, "you can explain why you installed a barrier across private property." Karen smiled the smile of someone who believes rules only apply to other people. "This isn't private property," she said. "This road falls within our protective—" "No, ma'am," Dorsey cut in. "It does not." Karen blinked once, offended. "Well, we have safety concerns." "You don't get to create your own law," Dorsey said. "You don't get to weld gates on someone else's land. And you don't get to block a man from entering his own home." Karen frowned, adjusting her sunglasses. "That gate is HOA property," she declared. "No," I said. "It's trespassing equipment." Wheeler snorted. Dorsey pointed at him. "Cut it." Karen erupted. "You can't do that. You have no authority to—" Dorsey didn't even look at her. "Wheeler," he repeated. The bolt cutters closed with a sharp, metallic snap. The lock dropped to the dirt. The gate sagged. Karen's jaw dropped. I swear even the camera tilted away like it didn't want to record the embarrassment. Dorsey folded his arms. "Gate comes down," he said. "Today. Legally." Karen sputtered something about calling county officials. "Go ahead," Dorsey said calmly. "They'll agree with me." Karen's face went rigid, a porcelain mask starting to crack. She snapped her clipboard shut with a sharp clack. "I hope you understand," she said, voice trembling with frustrated authority. "This isn't over. HOA security will be reviewing this incident, and we will be issuing consequences." Even Dorsey raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am," he said, "the only consequence here is you trespassing on someone's land." Karen jabbed a finger toward me. "You'll regret undermining community safety protocols," she hissed. "All of this will be documented." She turned sharply to leave. too sharply, and her right heel slipped on loose gravel. She caught herself at the last second, pretending nothing happened, but everyone saw it. Wheeler looked away to avoid laughing. Dorsey didn't bother hiding his smirk. Karen yanked open the SUV door and jumped in. But when she threw it in reverse and hit the gas, the rear tires spun in place, screaming against the gravel. No traction. She was stuck. For 3 long seconds, all we heard was her engine whining in pure humiliation. Finally, she rolled the window down 2 inches. "It's the terrain," she barked. "This soil is unstable." Dorsey deadpanned. "Ma'am, that's called user error." Karen floored it again. This time the SUV jerked backward, fishtailed wildly, and tore off in a cloud of dust and wounded pride. Dorsey watched her go and blew out a breath. "Well," he said, "that went about how I expected." I folded my arms. "That's the problem. She expected it to go differently." He nodded. "And that, Jake, is when people like her get dangerous." I looked down at the broken gate lying in the dirt like a defeated animal. "Oh yeah," I said quietly. "She's not done." The morning after the gate came down, I was still sweeping metal shards off the dirt when my phone buzzed. Not a call, an email notification. I wasn't subscribed to anything HOA related, so that alone was suspicious. A neighbor forwarded it with a note. "Thought you'd want to see this." I opened the Cedar Summit Ranch Community Bulletin. Urgent safety announcement. The subject line already made my jaw clench. Then I read the body. Yesterday, an unidentified male instigated damage to authorized community security equipment, coordinating with aggressive individuals to compromise neighborhood safety. Oh, she was clever. Not smart, but clever. Karen couldn't lie about who physically cut the lock. She watched Officer Wheeler do it. She argued with Lieutenant Dorsey while he ordered it. So, instead, she twisted the story. She made it sound like I orchestrated it, like the cops were my hired muscle, like I was leading a demolition crew. The email continued. "Residents should avoid the northern access road until further notice. The instigator is non-compliant, unverified, and potentially hostile." I choked on my coffee. "Potentially hostile? Lady," I barely raised my voice. But she wasn't done. Below the warning were screenshots of my truck taken from the HOA camera they'd installed on my road. Blurry zoom-ins. Circles drawn in red. The kind of smear job you'd expect from a teenager trying to frame their sibling for stealing cookies. I muttered under my breath, "Oh, Karen, you're playing a dangerous game with the truth." My phone buzzed again. Old Hal from down the ridge. "Boy," he wrote, "you're famous. Should I bring popcorn or ammunition?" I smiled, a weary smile, the kind a man gets right before the next punch lands, because I knew exactly what was coming. And I was right. Around noon, I walked down to my mailbox. Hot wind, dry gravel, quiet as a churchyard. Inside the box was a single envelope with no return address, just a label printed off a cheap home printer. Cedar Summit Ranch Authority, Notice of Assessment. Authority. The HOA ego was getting worse. I tore it open. Inside was, honestly, one of the ugliest documents I'd ever seen in my life. Comic Sans font, pastel blue headers, formatting that looked like a kindergarten newsletter. At the top, citation, unauthorized tampering with community safety infrastructure. Below that, fine amount, 6th due date. Immediate failure to comply may result in escalation protocols. I burst out laughing. I wish I could say a normal laugh. But it was one of those deep, can't breathe, hand on my knees laughs that echo off the canyon. Because in the bottom corner was their official-looking seal. Utah Department of Rural Transportation and Infrastructure. They spelled infrastructure wrong, and the department doesn't exist. I snapped a picture and sent it to Dorsey. 10 seconds later he called. "Jake," he said slowly, "you're holding evidence of felony-grade fraud." I figured. "And Comic Sans," he added. "Really? This woman thinks she's the governor of the desert." "No," he said. "She thinks she's smarter than the law. That's worse." By late afternoon, the smear campaign was in full sprint. 3 neighbors messaged me asking why the HOA claimed I threatened volunteers. One asked if I really commandeered law enforcement to destroy community property. Another said, "Karen says you swung bolt cutters at her staff." I rubbed my forehead. Bolt cutters? Her staff? Wheeler barely knew how to hold those cutters without pinching his fingers. Karen was inflating the story faster than a discount bounce house. But here was the problem with lies. To keep them alive, you need absolute loyalty. And Karen didn't have that, because at 7:12 p.m., my phone buzzed again, but this time from an unknown number. A short message. "We need to talk. She's going too far." Glenn. I stared at it a moment, surprised, but not shocked. He must have pulled my number from the public deed files Karen had forced him to search. She probably made him comb through every record with my name on it last week. And somewhere in that mess, my phone number was listed. For the first time since this war started, someone from inside her board was reaching out. And that meant something important. Karen didn't just cross a line. She crossed a line her own people couldn't defend. The crack in her armor had started, and cracks in people like her don't stay small. They widen, they split, then they shatter. I went to bed that night thinking maybe, just maybe, the gate incident had been enough humiliation to slow Karen down. But deep down, I knew better. People like her don't accept losing. They double down on stupid. So when I stepped onto my porch the next afternoon and saw a brand new steel gate standing where the old one had been cut down, I didn't even swear. I just sighed. This one was beefier, thicker posts, an electronic keypad, and a shiny Bluetooth receiver blinking like a Christmas light. They'd installed it fast. Probably paid triple for same-day emergency installation. On the keypad was a laminated paper, authorized personnel only, HOA safety zone. Safety zone, right. I walked up, looked at the keypad, and shook my head. Brand new hardware, still had the factory sticker on it. If I learned one thing from ex-mill buddies who tinkered with electronics, it's this. New tech always ships with a stupid default password. Sure enough, my phone picked up a Bluetooth device immediately. HOA Gate 3F9C. Pair, code 000, and I actually laughed out loud. That's what you get for rushing a job, Karen. I pulled the little black flipper zero from my pocket, a gift from a nephew who swore it could hack doorbells, garage doors, and half the junk built since 2010. I pressed a button. It recorded the gate signal, pressed another, it replayed it. Click. The gate swung open like it was welcoming me home. I didn't step through, I didn't touch anything, I just stood there, letting the absurdity wash over me. Karen spent thousands installing a new barricade, and I opened it like a hotel room door. I closed it again, opened it again, closed it, just to make sure it wasn't luck. Nope, it was just bad security. And the best part? My trail cameras caught the whole thing from 3 different angles. I figured Karen would come back when she noticed her impenetrable gate wasn't staying closed. I didn't expect her to come back at 2 in the damn morning, but that's exactly when I heard tires crunching lightly over gravel. That slow, guilty roll of someone who wants to be invisible, but doesn't know how. I slipped out onto my porch, barefoot, the cold desert floor biting at my skin. Didn't turn on any lights, just watched. Down the road, a white SUV idled with its headlights off. Passenger door opened, a flashlight flicked on, and there she was. Karen Sanders, hair tied back, black windbreaker stretched tight across her shoulders, moving like she was reenacting a spy movie she'd only seen the trailer for. With her was a tall, bearded guy, probably one of her volunteers, poor man. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. They walked up to the gate, the brand new, expensive, supposedly tamper-proof gate. Karen hammered the keypad frantically. The gate didn't move. She punched it again. Still nothing. She spun around to her bearded assistant and hissed something sharp. He shrugged helplessly. I grinned. Of course the gate didn't open. Bluetooth devices only stay paired for a few minutes before shutting down. And Karen didn't know the passcode, but I did. Well, Flipper Zero did. I tapped a button. From half a mile away, hidden in the dark, I heard the faint electronic click of the gate swinging open by itself. Karen jumped like she'd seen a ghost. The bearded guy actually yelped. I had to slap a hand over my mouth to keep from laughing. Karen shined her flashlight wildly around the desert, whisper yelling, "Did you see that? Someone's out here." The man stuttered. "It opened by itself." "No, it didn't," she snapped. "Someone is remote hacking our safety equipment." Remote hacking. She had no idea how right she was. She moved closer to the gate, took out her phone, and started snapping photos. Not of the gate malfunctioning, but of traffic cones, reflective tape, and a crowbar she had brought to stage the scene. She set the crowbar on the ground, took a photo, moved it an inch, took another, her Evidence, as she probably called it. The bearded guy shifted nervously. Karen, maybe we shouldn't. Quiet, she hissed. This road is a crime scene. I am documenting it. A coyote howled somewhere behind them. Karen froze, beamed her flashlight into the darkness. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then, she stepped backward and landed directly on her own crowbar. It clanged against the gravel with a metallic slap that echoed up the ridge. She flailed, stumbled, tried to recover her balance, tripped again, and knocked over 2 of her own traffic cones. The bearded man rushed to help her. She swatted his hand away. I know what I'm doing. No, ma'am, you do not. Eventually, she swept everything into the trunk in a panic. Cones, tape, crowbar, and they sped off so fast the SUV fishtailed like a wounded jackrabbit. Silence returned. Just the wind, the desert, and a man barefoot on the road shaking his head. She had absolutely no idea. Every second of her little midnight operation was on camera. Every lie she planned to tell just became evidence against her, and the gate she was trying to protect? I opened it with a 150 toy. Oh, Karen, I whispered, you picked the wrong man and the wrong road. By the next afternoon, the desert felt unusually still, not quiet, still, like the land itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what disaster Karen would cook up next. I went through my usual routine, coffee, checked the solar rigs, kicked the dirt off my boots just because it felt good, but part of me kept glancing toward the access road. After the midnight circus she'd pulled, I expected some kind of retaliation. A letter, a drone, a sheriff's deputy she'd sweet-talked, something. But by noon, nothing happened. Karen was planning. That was always worse than her acting. I walked back toward the house when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, local area code. I almost ignored it, until a text came through. We need to talk, privately. I know what she's doing. I frowned. Before I could type a reply, another message followed. Meet me at the old feed store parking lot, 5 minutes. I stared at the screen. I didn't like anonymous anything. Messages, calls, people. Out here, unexpected contact usually meant trouble. But something about that phrasing, we need to talk. I know what she's doing. Only one person would phrase it like that, Glenn. And sure enough, as I drove down the short stretch to the feed store, there he was, leaning against a dusty silver Hyundai, arms crossed tight like a man bracing for a storm. He looked jumpy, eyes darting, shoulders pulled up like he expected Karen to materialize out of thin air. I parked beside him and stepped out. He didn't even say hello. You got cameras on your place, right? He asked, voice low. I raised an eyebrow. Plenty. He nodded, relieved and afraid at the same time. Then he blew out a breath and rubbed his temples. I can't keep doing this, he muttered. She's gone too far this time. All right, I said gently. Start from the beginning. He glanced around again, making sure no one else was in earshot. Then he said it. I saw her last night. I kept my face calm. Near the gate, he swallowed. She told everyone she was homesick, said she had a migraine and needed darkness. Meanwhile, she dragged me and that poor maintenance guy out there at 2 a.m. Let me guess, I said. She brought cones, tape, and a crowbar. His eyes widened in surprise. You saw that? Cameras, I said simply. They caught all of it. He let out a shaky laugh. I knew it, he whispered. I knew she'd get sloppy. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded stack of papers, creased, worn, handled too many times. He held them out to me with 2 trembling fingers. I made copies, he said. If she finds out I did, she'll skin me alive. I unfolded them. Internal HOA Slack messages, screenshots, board discussions. And there it was, Karen's written plan. Word for word. He won't fight back. Guys like him don't know the law. Another. If we control the road, we control him. Doesn't matter what the deed says. Pressure works. And the worst one of all, if we need an agreement on file, just make one. Alan's in Alaska. No one's checking signatures. I stared at the page, part rage, part disbelief, part relief. Finally, proof of her intent. Glenn saw my face and immediately raised both hands. I didn't write any of that, he said quickly. She dictated half of it while pacing around the conference room like a prison guard. Why come to me? I asked softly. He blinked, surprised by the question. Then he sighed. "Because I'm tired," he said. "Tired of being bullied. Tired of watching her destroy people's lives because she gets bored. Tired of pretending I don't know she's rotten to the core." He wiped sweat from his brow. "And because you're the only one she can't push." There was something in his voice, not admiration exactly, but recognition. A man realizing that a storm bigger than himself had finally met a mountain that wouldn't move. I folded the papers carefully. "You understand?" I said. "This is enough to burn her entire house down." He nodded. "That's why I'm not putting my name on it," he said quickly. "I can't. I've got a mortgage, a wife with medical problems. I'll get crushed." I nodded back. "Then your name doesn't exist," I said. "Our little chat never happened." His shoulders sagged in relief. Then, before he got in his car, he paused. "Oh, and one more thing," he said. "She's planning something bigger, something stupid. She thinks the gate incident made her look weak. She won't accept that. She'll escalate." I exhaled slowly. Of course she would. Glenn gave me a tight, apologetic nod, climbed into his Hyundai, and drove off like he expected someone to chase him. I stood alone in the dusty lot, the papers held tight in my fist, the wind tugging gently at the edges. Karen had crossed the line before, but now she'd left footprints, and I was done letting her walk wherever she pleased. The next morning rolled in slow and dry like most desert mornings do. A pale gold sun crept over the ridge, lighting up the sagebrush and scattering long shadows across my property. But something felt different, not uneasy, no. It was the feeling right before a storm, when the air goes still and the animals go quiet, and even the wind seems to hold its breath. I grabbed my coffee, stepped onto the porch, and stared down the access road toward gate number 2. Still standing, still smug, but after last night's little ghost show, I doubted it was functioning the way Karen expected. I walked down the road, gravel crunching under my boots, the dog trailing behind me with his ears perked. The keypad's little LED still blinked, a soft, steady pulse. Alive, but clueless. I tapped the post. Solid, not cheap. Karen had sunk real money into this one. And then, as if on cue, the gate hiccuped. A tiny mechanical stutter. Barely noticeable, but I heard it. Something inside the motor was grinding, caught between two states, open and closed, like a confused robot. "Shouldn't have messed with the defaults," I muttered, sipping my coffee. The gate twitched again. Then a soft electronic chirp sounded. The motor engaged, and the arms of the gate jerked. Once, twice, then shuddered violently and locked in place halfway open, halfway closed, like a drunk man unsure if he wanted to sit or stand. I nearly spit my coffee out. It was the funniest damn thing I'd seen all week. "Bluetooth desync," I whispered. "Bless your heart, Karen." There was no world where she would accept this. Not after last night. Not after Glenn slipped me her little Slack confession. She'd push back harder and harder until she broke something too big to hide. I had no intention of touching the gate myself. Not a bolt, not a wire, not even a smudge. I wanted everything preserved exactly as it was, because I already knew what was coming next. And I wasn't wrong. At 9:17 a.m., a white HOA SUV rolled down the road from the Cedar Summit side, slower than usual, cautious. It stopped a few feet short of the stuck gate. Karen climbed out. Sunglasses, clipboard, lips pressed so tight they looked welded shut. She walked around the gate like she expected it to attack her, tapped the keypad with one perfectly manicured finger. Nothing. Tapped again, harder, still nothing. I stood far enough away to be not involved, but close enough to watch the show. She punched the keypad, shoved the gate, kicked the post. The gate barely wobbled. Finally, she leaned in and hissed at it under her breath, like the gate had personally insulted her family. Then something happened that made my morning. She pulled out her phone and tried to sync to the Bluetooth receiver. From where I stood, I could hear the faint, angry beep 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 of failed pairing attempts. She was trying every code she knew. 001, 1234, 2580. Nothing worked. She didn't know the factory reset trick, but I sure did. And the flipper zero in my pocket pulsed like a mischievous little devil, waiting to be used again. I didn't press the button, not now. Karen was digging her own grave. I didn't need to hand her the shovel. After 10 minutes of failing to open her own illegal gate, she called someone, probably her maintenance guy. She paced, gestured wildly, stabbed her finger at the broken motor like she was accusing it of arson. Then she did something that changed everything. She took her sunglasses off, and I saw her eyes, wild, desperate, frustrated, no control, no power, a queen without her crown. And that's when Glenn's warning echoed in my mind. She's planning something bigger, something stupid. He was right. Karen was spiraling, and spiraling people make mistakes. I waited until she drove away, kicking up dust like a wounded coyote fleeing a trap. Then I called the one man who needed to see this, Lieutenant Mark Dorsey. He picked up on the second ring. "Jacob, what now? You might want to come and take a look at this gate," I said. "It's having a rough morning." I heard him sigh, long and tired. "I'm already halfway through my coffee." "You'll want to finish it on the road," I replied. "This one's good." 20 minutes later, the cruiser rolled up beside me. Dorsey stepped out, stared at the gate, then rubbed the bridge of his nose with 2 fingers. "Tell me you didn't touch it," he said flatly. "I didn't touch it." "You sure?" "I swear on the dog." Dorsey nodded. That was good enough for him. He approached the gate, inspected the jammed motor, wiggled the half-open arms, checked the cement footings. "Fresh install," he muttered. "Bad calibration, cheap wiring. No permit either," I added. He shot me a look. "Oh, I've already confirmed that. Nothing on file." I shrugged. "Then that's obstruction again, isn't it?" He sighed. "Yeah. And misuse of security hardware, and unauthorized barrier installation, and—" He stopped mid-sentence, then turned, slowly. "Jacob, is that camera new?" I followed his gaze. Up in the branches of an old juniper tree, half hidden, was a little black camera, not mine, HOA branded, pointed straight at the gate and at my house. I felt heat rise in my chest. Dorsey clenched his jaw. "That's surveillance on private property." "Yep. And they didn't get consent." "Nope. That's felony territory." "Yep." He exhaled hard through his nose. "Jesus, Jacob, she's burying herself." I nodded, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt the tide turn. Karen wasn't just crossing boundaries anymore, she was sprinting past them, eyes closed, mouth open, screaming the whole way, and the law was finally catching up. Dorsey spent a long moment staring at that illegal camera lodged in the juniper tree. The little lens blinked red every few seconds, recording, transmitting God knows where. He sighed, a deep, exhausted exhale a man only makes after decades on the job. "Jacob," he muttered, "this isn't just an HOA dispute anymore. This is turning into a criminal file." I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The gate, the camera, the bullshit emergency justification. Karen had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. "Let me call this in," he said. While he spoke softly into his radio, I just stood there with my thermos of lukewarm coffee, watching sunlight shimmer off the broken motor. The desert was silent, still, waiting. When Dorsey clipped his radio back onto his vest, he looked older than he had 10 minutes ago. "She's spiraling," he said, "and spiraling people do dangerous things." Before I could answer, tires rolled up slow behind us, crunching gravel in that guilty way only nervous people drive. It was Glenn. He climbed out of his Hyundai with the jittery body language of a man carrying secrets that weigh more than stone. "Lieutenant," he whispered, you need to see this." Dorsey stepped closer. "What's wrong?" "Son," Glenn swallowed hard. "She's planning a board vote tonight to authorize the HOA to secure all access points affecting resident safety. She's calling your road a public necessity corridor." My jaw tightened. "A corridor," I repeated. Glenn nodded miserably. "She's printing charts, maps, claims of fire hazards. None of it makes sense, but the board, they're scared of her. And she knows it." Dorsey cursed under his breath. "She's trying to fabricate jurisdiction," he said. Glenn's hands shook as he reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn, heavily folded stack of papers. "Here," he said. "I made copies." He handed them to me like someone handing over a confession. Slack transcripts, board logs, and there it was, the written intent. If we control the road, we control him. And the worst line, just make a fake agreement. Alan's in Alaska, no one checks signatures. I folded the pages slowly, carefully, like evidence in a museum case. Glenn's voice shook. "I'm scared of her. She's treating this like a frontier war." I rested a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Glenn, you spoke up when it mattered. He nodded, but fear gnawed at the edges of his expression. "She's not stopping," he whispered. "She's planning something bigger tonight." Then he drove off, dust curling behind him. Dorsey watched him go, jaw clenched. "Jacob," he said, "we're approaching the point where she could lose more than her gait." Meaning? Meaning, if she pushes any further, the DA will open a full file. Perjury, fraud, evidence tampering, surveillance violations. Hell, maybe even attempted seizure of private property under false pretenses. The wind swept across the sagebrush. A storm was forming over Cedar Summit, and I could feel the electricity humming beneath my boots. I walked back toward my house, leaving Dorsey to photograph the malfunctioning gate, the illegal camera, the wiring mess, and the scuffed dirt where Karen had clearly tried and failed to open her own barricade. The dog trotted ahead, the sun climbed, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the tide turning. But the universe wasn't done with me yet, not by a long shot, because sitting on my porch, tucked into the corner of the doormat, was a large manila envelope. No mailman comes this far down the road. UPS won't even try, and the county hasn't delivered anything here in months, which meant only one thing. Someone from Cedar Summit left it. I picked it up. No return label. The back sealed with one of those golden, official-looking stickers you buy in bulk online. I carried it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and opened it with a pocket knife. Inside was exactly what I expected, yet somehow still worse. A single-page legal agreement printed on aged parchment paper that still smelled like the office supply aisle at Walmart. At the top, property maintenance and joint access agreement between Cedar Summit Ranch HOA and Parcel B17. Below that, a bunch of generic legal filler text about shared jurisdiction, seasonal maintenance, and security oversight. And at the bottom, the signature, Alan M. Brody, owner Parcel B17. My stomach dropped, because Alan Brody would never sign anything involving an HOA. Hell, the man moved to Alaska because the county put a speed bump near his driveway and he called it socialist pavement fascism. Below his forged signature was another, Karen R. Sanders, president. Then a shiny red HOA stamp. But the worst part wasn't the fake signature, or the stamp. Oh no, the worst part was the font. The entire agreement, a document meant to look like it was created 7 years ago, was printed in Cambria, a font that didn't even exist when Alan sold me the property. I actually laughed. Not loudly, just one stunned, exasperated burst of disbelief. Then I looked closer. The header alignment was off by 2 millimeters. The margins were imperfect. And the watermark? A blurry clip art tree logo pulled straight from Google Images. Good God, it was the dumbest forgery I'd ever seen. And yet, this was the weapon Karen planned to use against me. A forged agreement, delivered in secret, hours before her board vote. The trap was set, but not for me, for her. I folded the document neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and set it beside Glenn's Slack printouts. By the time I finished, there was enough evidence on that table to bury Karen Sanders deeper than a cold winter septic tank. I dialed one number, Tom Delgado, my attorney. He answered on the second ring. "Jacob, something wrong?" "Oh yeah," I said, staring at the forged signature. "You could say that. You might want to bring your green binder, the one for fraud cases." "That's the one." He whistled softly. "All right," he said. "I'll clear my afternoon." I hung up and stepped back onto the porch. The desert wind had shifted. A storm was coming. And Karen had just handed me the lightning. By the time the hearing rolled around, the whole county felt like it had been holding its breath. Cedar Summit HOA had filed their complaint against me, full of wild accusations, buzzwords, and enough legal nonsense to choke a horse. But none of that mattered, because Tom and I came armed. We walked into the county civil courthouse together, a squat beige building with one flickering fluorescent light above the door, carrying a stack of evidence thick enough to level a small town. Karen arrived 10 minutes late, dressed like a Pinterest version of a paralegal, arms full of binders, lips pressed into a thin line of determination. Behind her, the young HOA attorney she'd hired looked like he'd Googled how to be a lawyer the night before and hadn't slept since. He didn't look at us. I suspect he already knew he was walking into a wood chipper. Judge Holloway entered, no nonsense, mid-50s, steel gray hair pulled tight. She carried herself like a woman who had seen every variety of stupid rural drama and had long since lost her patience for all of it. "Let's proceed," she said. Karen's attorney stood first. "Your Honor," he began dramatically, "this case is about safety. It is about community protection. My client, President Sanders, acted only to ensure the well-being of Cedar Summit residents. Mr. Cafield has shown a pattern of hostility." Tom rose without waiting. "Objection, argument, not fact." "Sustained," the judge snapped, barely glancing up. The young attorney deflated faster than a punctured tire. He changed tactics. "Your Honor, we'd like to submit this access agreement, signed by the previous owner of Parcel B17, granting joint jurisdiction of the road to Cedar Summit HOA. Ah, there it was, the forged agreement, the moment Karen had built her entire fantasy case around. He held it up proudly, like a magician showing a card he was certain would astonish the crowd. Tom didn't even wait. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "that document is fraudulent." Karen jerked in her seat. The judge turned her gaze toward Tom, sharp, hawk-like. "Explain." Tom stepped forward, placing the document on the evidence table. "First, the signature. Alan Brody is alive, well, and has provided a sworn statement that he has never, under any circumstances, signed anything involving an HOA. He handed over Alan's statement. Second, the paper, purchased 2 months ago at a local print shop. We have the dated receipt." He placed the print shop invoice beside it. "Third, the font used in this document, Cambria, was not commercially available 7 years ago when the signature is dated." A soft murmur rippled across the courtroom. The judge raised an eyebrow. "And the watermark," Tom continued, "is a stock image pulled directly from Google. Reverse image search confirms it." He stepped back. "Your Honor, this document is not just fake. It is insultingly fake." You could hear Karen swallow from across the room. The judge pressed her lips into a tight line. "Ms. Sanders," she said, "were you aware this agreement was fabricated?" Karen stood, hands trembling. I was told it was in our archives. I didn't check." "So you submitted it under oath," the judge cut in, "without verifying its authenticity." Silence. Stone cold. Guilty silence. Tom wasn't done. "And finally, Your Honor." He presented the Slack printouts Glenn had given me, a nail in the coffin. In her own words, "Just make a fake agreement. Alan's in Alaska, no one checks signatures." Karen sank into her chair as if her bones had dissolved. Her attorney looked like he wanted to dig a hole and crawl into it. Judge Holloway leaned back, eyes narrowing. "I'm prepared to rule." The courtroom went still, dead still. First, the lawsuit against Mr. Cafield is dismissed with prejudice. Second, Ms. Sanders is fined $25,000 for submitting falsified evidence. Third, Cedar Summit HOA will pay $84,000 in restitution and legal fees. Fourth, Ms. Sanders is removed from her position as HOA president effective immediately. And finally, this matter is referred to the district attorney for review under Utah Criminal Code for document tampering and fraudulent filing. The gavel came down like thunder. Karen didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just cracked, quietly, completely, like porcelain dropped on concrete. Tom closed his binder and whispered, "Told you she'd self-destruct." He wasn't wrong. Karen Sanders walked into that courtroom thinking she would seize my road. She walked out lucky she wasn't in handcuffs. When the dust finally settled, the desert felt different. Not louder, not angrier, just clean. Like the land itself had been holding its breath through the whole damn ordeal and finally exhaled. 2 days after the hearing, the county sent a crew to haul off the twisted metal that used to be Karen's community gate. They loaded it into a truck like scrap, because that's all it ever was. I stood by my fence line, arms crossed, watching it disappear down the road. A small, satisfied smile crept in. Tom pulled up a minute later, boots crunching on gravel. He pointed toward the main road. "You see Karen's place?" he asked. I nodded. "For sale sign went up this morning. They put a lien on the house to cover the HOA's legal bills," Tom finished. "Good," I said simply. "She paid for the show." Tom leaned against the truck. "You realize," he continued, "most folks would have caved. They would have paid the fine, joined the HOA, and prayed the harassment stopped." I shrugged. "Yeah, well, most folks don't own land out here for the easy life." He laughed. "Fair point. By late afternoon, the sun dipped low, washing the desert in that warm gold I'd fallen in love with years ago. I fired up the grill, because nothing says victory like a slow-cooked ribeye and the smell of mesquite wood. Dorsey and Wheeler showed up first, still in uniform, but off the clock. Then Glenn arrived. He looked nervous, like he wasn't sure he should be there. I waved him over anyway. "You did the right thing," I told him. He nodded, staring at his boots. "I'm trying to," he said quietly. We ate on the porch, paper plates, cold beer, the kind of silence that only exists between folks who've been through something real together. The sky turned deep blue. The crickets woke up. Dorsey raised a bottle, and the others followed. "To private land," Dorsey said. Wheeler added, "To people who actually stand up for it." Tom clinked his bottle against mine. "And to corrupt HOA presidents learning their limits." We all drank. I leaned back in my chair, boots propped on the railing, and let the night swallow the last of the heat from the day. I glanced at the newly installed steel bollards along my road, gleaming under the moonlight. They were a lot stronger than Karen's cheap gate. Out here, nothing was perfect. The land was rough, the work was hard, and the world was getting crazier every year. But this, my porch, my road, my stretch of desert, was mine. Bought and paid for, fought for, protected. And now, no HOA on earth would ever forget my name. I raised my bottle one last time, looking out at the wide, dark desert. "Two boundaries," I said, my voice carrying over the silence. "May we always know where ours end." I paused, letting the finality sink in. "And where the HOA can shove theirs." The bottle clinked against the railing, and the desert was silent again.